This is episode 193, and you're listening to the Conservation and Science podcast, where we take a deep dive into topics of ecology, conservation, and human-wildlife interactions. And I'm your host, Tommy Serafinski, and I'm losing my voice. As you can hear, I'm still recovering from some bad throat infection, so I'm not going to drag this introduction for too long because I simply can't. This is the first episode in 2025, and we are coming back to the topic of hunting, you might say. Although hunting is not the primary subject, it's sort of in the background, and we are talking about two other topics as the primary topics. First is human-wildlife conflict, and we're going to use example of situation with bears and conflict with brown bears in Romania. And then later on, we are going to talk about trophy hunting. And we haven't spoke about trophy hunting for quite a while on the podcast. And I remember at some point I said, I'm not talking about trophy hunting on the podcast anymore because everything was already said and it's just boring, just over and over the same thing. But I figure enough time has passed that it would be useful to revisit the topic of trophy hunting from the perspective of human-wildlife conflict and habitat protection, especially with our guest today. Our guest today is Jens Ulrik Høgh, and he is a hunting journalist. He is a founder and editor of many hunting magazines. He was also doing some communication work for massive hunting organizations like CIC or Nordic Safari Club. But obviously in this episode, and as in most of my episodes, our guests are speaking for themselves, expressing their personal opinions, and that's no different this time around. So folks, if human-wildlife conflict and habitat conservations are your things and you're curious to learn about hunting and what role it plays in those things, then this episode is definitely for you. So enjoy the show. Jens, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you, and I'm delighted you accepted the invitation.
Oh, I enjoy being here.
Excellent. Listen, before we jump into all the interesting topics of conservation, hunting, human-wildlife conflict, and the likes, could you give our listeners a short version of who you are, what you do, and what was the history that brought you, that you do what you do?
Of course. Very briefly, I started out as a hunter here in Scandinavia where I live. I'm the first hunter in my family, so I started from scratch. I became very interested and engaged in hunting. And from there, I went into freelance writing, at first for hunting magazines. And gradually, I started to explain hunting to non-hunters in mainstream media. At first in our local languages, and for the last couple of years, I've been doing it as a job for a hunting organization we have here in Scandinavia, trying to engage in the debate about hunting and explain what's up and down in some of these very complex questions, especially to the non-hunters of this world.
Yes, and this is very, very important to have this conversation, like you said, with non-hunters if we, want to preserve hunting for the future. Listen, Jens, you have vast experience, and your experience spans multiple continents, Africa, India, in Europe, in Romania. You've been in a human-wildlife conflict zones, and I want to start with the human-wildlife conflict. Did you notice any any similarities in those conflict zones? Anything that is, universal across the continents?
Yeah, very much so. One similarity, especially when we have human-wildlife conflicts that endangers people, endangers their livestock, and endangers their livelihoods. All over the place, you have quite a huge level of fear ingrained in those people living close to these animals. And sometimes the outside world doesn't really recognize that fear. So I'll give you a good example in Sweden, where I come from. We have wolves, and the rational, the rational angle on wolves is that they are not really dangerous to people. They kill a lot of sheep, and we all know the stories. In special circumstances, in a very rare circumstances, they can be dangerous to people. But people living in the Swedish countryside where there is a lot of wolves are typically not very comfortable. They are afraid. And from my point of view, this is the biggest problem we have here in Europe and Scandinavia, is that constant level of fear that actually drives people to want to get rid of these animals. And it doesn't help, on the contrary, actually, to try and convince these people. And it especially doesn't help to tell them that they are irrational or stupid or overly sensitive or whatever we say from our point of view. But it's actually the same all over the world. I was just in Romania a couple of months ago, visiting this actually tiny area in Transylvania where they have most of the Romanian brown bears. And these people in the countryside, they are living in constant fear to a degree where they change their daily habits. They used to be able to, walk into the forest and collect mushrooms, or let the kids go and play hide and seek and whatever. And all that is gone. And they're always thinking, what if I meet a bear? Where can I go? How do I ensure my safety? And they all know, if not directly somebody, then they all know of somebody who's been either mauled by a bear or even killed by a bear. And obviously, that level of fear gets to a point where people, and that's also a common thing all over the world where you have these wildlife conflicts, at some point, people start taking matters in their own hands. And then things are running out of control. In Romania, they actually poured honey on the railway tracks.
Oh, my word.
To lure the bears in, and the train would come and, finish the job. They put antifreeze glycol in meat and put it out for the bears. And obviously, that will kill a bear. But obviously will also kill a dog or a fox or wolf or whatever comes by. So really, really horrible cases of poaching committed by ordinary people who are basically just afraid.
What role does it play, the traditional ways of dealing with those animals? Because in the conversation I have on the podcast, it is often quite repeated theme is that people who remember and live with those dangerous animals for generations, they sort of have to learn to live alongside them and manage them and themselves, while the conflict is especially severe in the situations where that traditional knowledge is gone for whatever reasons, whether for the reason that animals were not there and then they come back, or perhaps people's lifestyles changed and then generation to generation they forgot how to live alongside those animals. How big of a issue that is?
I think it's a big issue, and the bears is a really good example, because as I said earlier, I have a lot of experience from Sweden. I live in Sweden. And in Sweden, we have quite a big bear population since decades back. But we really don't have any problems. We don't have any human-wildlife conflicts of that matters in Sweden. It's so rare that anything happens. Whereas in Romania, they had the same situation until 2016, with an even larger and more concentrated bear population. And then, under pressure from animal rights groups, they more or less overnight banned bear hunting.
Wow!
And two things happened in Romania. One thing is obviously the bear population started to grow rapidly because they had been able to keep it at a high population, but sort of level. stable population, but it started to grow. The bears started to spread, obviously, because there was not enough room for them in their traditional habitat, and that brought them closer to people. And since nobody was hunting them, surprisingly fast, the bears got habituated. They lost their fear of humans. And then you had an more or less exponential development in conflicts, and especially because the conflicts in Romania are many. So you have everything from crop damage. A couple of bears can really ruin a field of corn or a field of oat or whatever they grow out there. You have livestock killings. The big bears kills the cows. You have break-ins into stables, companies, houses. The bears just looking for food. They told us in one place, in one particular village down there, they had to disable the automatic doors in the supermarkets because the bears found out.
Wow.
You just walk up to the door and there's the food. So a lot of practical problem. And of course, in Romania, the worst thing was that because bears completely lost their fear of people, they started begging for food along the tourist routes. And very soon, they started to attack people. Initially, just looking for food in our pockets and whatever. But since they have fingernails like this, you get hurt. And eventually, you had bears that killed people. And from 2016 and until now, 300 people in actually a very small area of Romania has been mauled by bears, and 26 people has been killed. So it's a huge problem. And again, when I compare to Sweden, where we hunt the bears every year, we don't have any such problems. Same species, fairly populated areas, but no problems with the bears. When the bear in Sweden smells a person, it's out of there. And it used to be like that in Romania as well. So what happened now in Romania is that they reinstated bear hunting from this year, but in order to sort of re-educate the bears, to install the fear of man in these beasts, so to speak, I mean, that is going to take a long while because every bear who is right now unafraid of people has to be taken out because they won't forget that we have sweets in our pockets.
And was this welcomed by the local community?
The local community are super happy about the opportunity to start hunting the bears again. The international community is condemning the initiative to reinstall bear hunting, but the problem is that they haven't really come up with any alternatives. And the big problem, in my point of view, is that the bears in Romania has been so habituated by now that this is not a problem that's going to be fixed with a couple of years of hunting. I believe, and it's just a theory of mine, but I believe that it will take maybe 10 or 20 years before the bears have that previous level of fear or respect of people.
How long the ban on hunting?
The ban was for 8 years.
For 8 years. So
8 years.
So it would probably take along this time.
I think it will take longer to get back to the previous situation because and obviously what they have to do now, which is also a concern among hunting organizations around the world, who basically applauds that they are going to manage the bears with hunting again, but it's a big concern that in order to get results in the near future, obviously they have to prioritize to kill the bears that are the most habituated first. We drove around there for 3 or 4 days and saw several bears, right next to the road, just waiting for people to come and throw some bread or some sweets at them. And of course, those bears have to go first because there's no way to re-educate those bears. They have lost the fear of humans. And the problem is a lot of those bears are females with cubs. So those cubs are lost as well. And just to boil everything down, back in 2016, I'm sure that these animal rights organizations really, really felt that they were doing something good for the bears. But I'm also sure that in order to get back to the situation where bears and Romanian peasants in this area can coexist, it's going to be a bear bloodbath, because we have gone to the point where there's no other way.
And was the conservation status of bears in any sort of decline, or
no? They were the problem. No, it was not. The problem was that they were not really sure about the numbers. So what they had to do now, because now they are sure that they are way more bears than ever. So what they have to do now in order to reinstate hunting is to also come up with some really good systems of counting the bears, some scientifically sound systems that are a lot better than what they inherited from Ceausescu's regime back in the days. But during the backwards calculation, it's pretty obvious that the bears were not threatened in 2016 by any means. There was a lot of bears, and now there is a hell of a lot of bears. Pardon my French. So what they're doing now is that they have come up with systems to count the bears, and again it's going to rely heavily on hunters. And what's new and what makes this system a lot more bulletproof than earlier is that they're going to base it mainly on DNA sampling. Every 10 years, they're going, in an orderly manner to collect bear shit and see how many individuals they come up with. And then they will have some sort of algorithm.
There are fantastic methods these days with environmental DNA. You can even find out what mammals are by picking up the DNA from rivers and kind of extrapolate that.
It's great, and it's all come to good use within the last 10 years or so. So a lot has happened. So I'm not worried that this new management by hunting will endanger the bears in any way. But I do worry that it will take longer than people hope for to get back to a situation where human-bear conflicts return to close to zero incidents.
Was that a matter that we see, and I'm sure you can give examples from other places than Romania, that the decision makers were disconnected from the realities on the ground? So
very much so. And that's another common feature of human-wildlife conflicts, because from my point of view, it always goes bad when political decisions are made, because these guys are not biologists. They are not land users. They have no practical experience whatsoever with whatever they're dealing with, and it's typically at that point that things goes very, very bad. And the problem is that no matter how powerful a politician feels, it's very, very hard for them to admit that they have absolutely no power over nature. And they have to learn it the hard way every single time. In Romania, one of the issues on top of the biological issues here is that this particular part of Transylvania is inhabited almost exclusively by a Hungarian minority in Romania. So there's also a lot of, political bad blood between them and the rest of the Romanians. And that has had an effect on bear management, which is, again, why it has no biological reasons to do things differently there. But unfortunately, that has played a role as well. But what they have said to us now is that they are back on a strictly fact-based track where they will try and manage the bears just based on facts and monitoring of the bear population from here on. But of course, I am 100% sure that when we see the first pictures of foreign hunters in Romania having killed a bear, because this is already happening as we speak, then we have the shitstorms all over again. So in order to get back to a situation where they have that sort of balance is the wrong way, but sort of same status quo, the wrong word, but sort of same status quo as they had before the hunting ban. They have to stand their ground, because there's going to be a lot of storm hitting those politicians again.
Oh, for sure. And tell me, what is the balance, or what is the proportion between local hunters and, like you said, tourist hunters who are coming?
I think that in the future, when the most problematic bear individuals has been shot, then I think maybe 80% of the hunters, or maybe more, will be foreign hunters who will pay for the hunt. But until those problematic bears are taken out, it's probably going to be the other way around, because I don't think any traveling hunters from abroad would be interested in shooting a 3-year-old bear who is begging for sweets at the roadside.
Gotcha. I thought you're gonna say that's gonna be too dangerous for them, but the opposite. It's just like a teddy bear over there. Like I'm not gonna shoot that one.
And it's actually sad, but it's really those bears that they have to take out first, because they are by far the most dangerous ones.
Because this is what people don't understand, right? And we saw those videos on YouTube, like, oh my God, it's a bear, it's lovely. And then they forget that is actual bear, like you said, with the big massive claws, and it will break your neck with one swift move.
They told us many stories as we were there, but one of the ones I remember best is that there was this elderly woman from a big city in Romania who went to the area to see the bears. And it's not difficult at all, because in the forest, they're at the roadside to all the big tourist destinations. They're just waiting for the cars to slow down and throw some food at them. So what they've been trying to do is to tell the tourists not to feed the bears, but obviously it doesn't work. So you have this elderly woman, she leaves the car and she starts giving the bear sweets from her pocket. And this young bear, it's only 150 kilos or something like that, is eating the sweets. And then she gets the brilliant idea to take a selfie, to turn her back at the bear and take a selfie for her Instagram profile. And as she does it, the last picture she takes is with the bear hugging her from behind, just to look for some more sweets inside her clothes.
That's an awesome profile photo.
Yeah.
I bet.
I don't know if she were heavily mauled or if she was actually killed, but I've met a few of those people who were heavily mauled, and it's I mean, most of them wish that they were killed. It's really not a nice fate to be mauled by a bear.
I can tell a story about bear from Poland. I think that listeners never heard that story. I actually, a couple of years ago, went to Poland to see the bears. And the gamekeeper, the local gamekeeper, was telling us a story. There was 2 German hunters, and they were crawling into like a young, I don't know what's the proper term, like a young forest that was planted, and they were crawling underneath it, and there was a bear in there, and obviously the bear mauled one of those hunters. He ended up in a hospital. Some massive amount of stitches on him, like really, but he wasn't, his life wasn't in danger, but he was badly mauled. And his buddy come to him, and he says, the guy who was mauled says, like, hey, I lost my hat, it was like a memorabilia, my hat in this wood. Would you go there and pick that one for me? And this guy goes there to the place where he was mauled by the bear. And a couple of hours later, he lands on the next bed in the hospital, mauled by the same bear. And the guy goes like, how stupid you have to be. Your body just been heavily mauled, right? He was lucky he survived. And now you go to the same place, the same day, to pick his hat. His lucky hunting hat or something. Like, oh. So, like people's stupidity knows no bounds, I guess. It's
exactly. Exactly, and in Romania right now, they have these warning signs all over the place. Don't go into the forest. There's bears, but people do so anywhere. And the last incident that happened when somebody was actually killed was right before I went there in late summer, and it was a 19-year-old Romanian girl. She was victim number 26, who actually died from a bear attack since 2016. And it's of course, it's always a super sad story when a life is lost, but it's also a little bit strange that it took 26 victims. The difference between her and the other 25 was that she was from one of the biggest cities in Romania. She was very good looking. And there was, there was this whole Instagram, Facebook profile on this pretty young girl. And that created a shitstorm in Romania so severe that they called in the parliament from their summer vacation to reinstate hunting because of public
overreaction, pressure. Right? It's like
yes.
It's like couldn't you do this properly from day one?
Yes, exactly. So you may have had 25 elderly peasants before her that didn't provoke the same reaction. I mean, obviously, I think it's a very good idea that they go back to the proven solution and says, okay, if we want to live with bears, we have to manage them by hunting them.
What do you say? Because I'm sure that's, I don't know the specifics of the situation in Romania, and I'm learning from you a lot right now. But I'm guessing from the other situations that there were voices like, oh, we should manage them in a non-lethal way. So were there any voices like that about non-lethal management, and is it doable, possible?
Yes, there is a lot of voices like that, and they've been trying to do that for the last 8 years. And as I said, during that time, the incidence has been growing exponentially. So they have been proven wrong, unfortunately. And I would take that a little bit further, because I've looked into bear management all over the world. I don't know of a single place in the world where non-lethal management of a big and growing bear population have shown any kind of success in preventing these sad incidents of human-wildlife conflict with bears.
Yeah, but I guess if the issue is the sheer numbers rather than the behavior, right? Then
it's both. I mean, because when the numbers grow, the bears are sort of pressured into human populated areas. So there's more contact when bear numbers grow, and if they're not hunted, then obviously the habituation process just goes on.
It's a good point that the growing number is driving the habituation, is driving the habits. Jens, you mentioned on the start of this conversation that there was a lot of poaching going on, and obviously, as usual in those cases, if the bear gets poisoned by some antifreeze or something, that's definitely less humane death than from the bullet of a hunter.
Of course.
Tell me, what is your take, maybe more general, on the role of hunting to counteract, poaching, illegal killing, but also I would like you to elaborate on the role of hunting in preserving the population, right? Because people who are listening to that and they're maybe not that versed in the hunting topics, they might have a picture that, now they want to kill all the bears, which again is like a typical argument.
Yes.
Right?
And of course that's not the case, because the hunters we have, at least in Europe and North America today, basically more or less all over the world, but hunters like me and everybody else who hunts in Europe are what we call recreational hunters. And a lot of people dislike that idea, because what it basically means is that we go hunting because we like to go hunting. It's not that we will die from starvation tomorrow, or that we cannot feed our kids, or for that matter, that we make a ton of money on selling the products. It's simply because we like that choice of lifestyle. And it's so important to us that obviously we want to be able to hunt next year and in 10 years, and we want to be able to teach our children and our grandchildren to go hunting, and to give them the same opportunities or better opportunities for going hunting than we have. So we have a very strong interest in preserving the wildlife. And obviously we know that even though we only hunt for comparatively few species out of the thousands and thousands of species out there, to preserve those species, we need to work to preserve entire ecosystems. And to do that, we need to preserve habitat. So it's sort of a closed circle. It's in our very own interest to work for the preservation of nature, because if we don't, we cannot have strong populations of wildlife, of game to hunt. So this is the driver all over the world where hunting is mentioned as an incentive for nature conservation. In many countries, especially the poorer countries of the world, people like me go on a hunting holiday, basically. Again, because we like to hunt, and it's nice with a change of scenery, and it's exciting to experience how they hunt in Africa or North America or wherever. But if you take a country like Africa, the incentive there is not that the locals like to hunt as it is here in Europe for us. The incentive there is that somebody from the outside comes and pays a lot of money for the experience. So suddenly, the local Africans have the opportunity to choose, do we use this land for conventional agriculture, meaning cows and goats, or do we use it for natural habitat and earn some money on the hunting, on selling the surplus animals for hunting? And that's basically boils down to a calculation. And in those countries where the preservation of natural habitat for hunting is a better deal, this is naturally where we end. And going back to poaching, there's a few different definitions of poaching, but I like to, illegal hunting. The problem is that it is by definition unregulated. So nobody knows what's going on, and there's no facts to build future management on. There's no way to say, okay, we think that in this area we can take out 3 buffalo bulls, because these guys are poachers. They're criminals. They're thieves. They will take whatever they can, just as a regular burglar here or car thief or whatever. He will not stop because it's not sustainable what he's doing. It's the same with poachers. So that's why poaching, illegal hunting, is such a massive problem. There's no way to regulate it. There's no way to stop it before it becomes unsustainable. But a few things, a few consequences of recreational hunting tourism that has an effect on poaching is, obviously you have people in that local community now making their livelihood on arranging hunting. They get money from outsiders to come and hunt. And of course, if those outsiders cannot come and hunt because poachers ruined the area, then the business is gone. So there's a lot of local incentive to prevent poaching in areas where they make money on legal hunting. Another thing that actually prevents a lot of poaching when you have legal hunting going on is that every hunter typically hunts with a guide and maybe a tracker or whatever. So it's groups of 3 or 4 or more people going through the bush with firearms in a more or less random pattern, looking for whatever they're hunting. Every single one of those groups obviously poses a danger to a poacher because they don't want to run into these people. So there's eyes on the area, and there's some guns floating around, and nobody wants that conflict. So a hunting area is a lot more risky to enter for a poacher than an area with no hunters, simply because of that practical fact that people are moving around all the time.
Unless there is such an organized poaching that's dangerous for hunters to move into area where there are organized gangs of poachers. But that's, I guess, it's entire different story again.
That's an entire different story because, again, poachers are not difficult, not very different from say burglars. I mean, if a burglar has a choice between a house with a dog and a house with no dog, he will pick the house with no dog, typically. And it's just the same mechanism. You don't want to take too high risks. And again, if a poacher knows that there's a high value animal for him, like a rhino, then he will stop at nothing. Then he will fly in with a helicopter and shoot at whatever comes in his way. So it's not a black and white solution, but there's a clear tendency that hunting areas sees much less poaching than non-hunting areas, because in the non-hunting areas nobody has the financial incentive to keep poaching at a minimum, and you don't have this constant patrolling and this constant surveillance.
Well, so we know that in many cases those poachers are rather be game scouts for hunters and use their knowledge of the area and animals in a, not risking being against the law, and usually also getting better money, or at least legal money, by using the same skills. They still in the bush because they like it and they know the animals, but they kind of like have a different.
What we see in Southern Africa is that if we take rhino as an example, which is probably the most valuable animal for the poachers, most of the rhinos are shot on state-owned ground. So most of the rhinos are killed in the national parks, probably because, as you mentioned, there's unfortunately a little bit of corruption going on, to say the least. So you have park rangers who knows where these animals are. You even have a lot of cases where vets has been involved in poaching. And again, on the private land where you have at the moment a lot more rhinos than on the in the national parks, the rhinos are much better guarded. So the poachers know that there's a bigger risk of going into private land. It happens, of course, but it's just unproportionally more dangerous to be a rhino in a national park in South Africa than on private land. And that has actually shifted the entire ownership balance, because the state-owned rhinos has been, depleted rapidly over the last decades, whereas in many cases the privately owned population has been growing slowly. So there are more privately owned rhinos in Southern Africa than state-owned rhinos.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the rhino situation is a material for another entire podcast again.
Yes, but of course it will come to the point. I hope not, but it may come to the point where rhino horns get so valuable that it's worth the risk to go into the
They already worth more than gold, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. But still, it's easier to pick up the gold in the Kruger Park or the Suslurium Park than it is in a heavily guarded private area.
Jens, I gotta ask you your view on the following, and this is a question that it's not, I guess, not widely asked. You mentioned earlier in the situation in Romania that you expect that 80% will be tourist hunters. Earlier, like we were talking about the Africa, and obviously in Africa, majority of hunting are, or if not, like almost all of the hunting are tourist hunters. I always think about local hunters, like you know what I mean, like they are people who would like to hunt those animals who are locals, and then those tourist hunters with all the good things that are happening, money to the economy, and control of poaching and jobs in the area. I'm not questioning that, but I always feel like there is a group of local hunters, being in Romania or in Africa, who would go like, damn, I would love to go hunting. But then the prices of the resource are so... It's a little bit like with housing, right? It's a nice tourist area, and the rich people from the city buying houses, and the locals, they just have to move out because they don't have a place to live. So I think there is an element, or maybe it's a question, do you see the element like this going on in hunting, that there's a local guy who would love to go hunting, but it's like absolutely not doable financially for him?
Yes, I definitely see that, but not so much in Eastern Europe, because in Romania, the way they're organized is that basically the entire country is a hunting area from old times, and it's divided in a lot of smaller areas who each has a group of hunters, local hunters managing it. So what they do is that most of the hunting, especially for meat, so females and calves and young males and stuff like that are always hunted by the local hunters, mainly. And then they have these few trophy animals that are worth a lot of money for foreign hunters, and they sell them to sort of make things make ends meet. So I'm really not under the impression in the Eastern European countries that you have a lot of frustrated local hunters who are envious of the rich foreigners coming and paying a lot for the trophies. They do get allowed down there to shoot a couple of trophies, but obviously it's they cannot go in Romania and shoot a huge stag, every one of them every year. So it's sort of a every 10 years or something like that. But most of the hunting taking place in Eastern Europe is actually carried out by local hunters. In Africa, the situation is obviously way different. In South Africa, the vast majority of hunters hunting in South Africa are actually South African. But they're hunting for meat. They call them biltong hunters, named after their dried meat down there. So what they sell to the foreigners is the trophy animals, which brings in a lot of money, and all the surplus animal regulation management, you could say, all the surplus females and young males and calves and what have you are basically shot by local hunters. But then you have a whole different issue, and that's with the poorer local segments in Africa, because you have a lot of black people down there who would love to have some meat in their pot, and those are the people who basically goes, we say poaching, goes and hunt the local animals for meat, subsistence poaching, you could call it, and that's a huge problem for the entire hunting community. Not so much that it happens, because in my point of view, it's inevitable. I mean, you have people who wants to feed their families, but the problem is how to deal with it in a manner that makes it sustainable for the future, because obviously it's possible. What we do know we cannot do, and we know this from our own experience and from experience all over the world, is just to give it free, because free for all always leads to the tragedy of the commons. You always get a completely depleted landscape, and you can see that all over Africa. When you move outside the hunting areas, there's hardly any game left, and that's again because it's been unregulated. But I know of a few outfits down there who's really working on managing their wildlife in a manner that's more fair to the local population. And again, to be honest, I don't think it matters much, at least not to the people I've met down there who kills the animals. What really matters?
Yeah, it might be like they're not. It might be that they're not interested at all. I'm just thinking.
I don't think they are much into the hunting experience. At least that's not been my experience. But they do need the protein. They do need the meat. And more outfitters in Africa, as I see it, are looking actively into distributing larger and larger shares of the meat that they harvest in the local area, also as a way to discourage poaching.
Jens, you mentioned the T word, trophy. So I gotta ask you about that. You shared the quote from Aldo Leopold not long ago about this universal need of humans to preserve a trophy, a sort of a trophy, which was funny because it was from the South County Almanac, which I probably read 3 times in the last 2 years. But I recognized the quote, but I never connected that with an actual, like a big heated discussion about trophy hunting. So what do you think drives this universal human need of preserving some sort of a trophy?
I couldn't say that I know. I think it's a very, very old drive. In Denmark, we have found hunting trophies in excavations of old Stone Age houses that are more than 5,000 years old. To me, and I don't really see myself as a trophy hunter per se, but I do occasionally keep a physical trophy or a picture or sometimes even a rock I picked up at the place or whatever. To me, it's simply just a memento, and I because I go hunting for the experience of it. I've also visited places just to experience those places, and typically I would bring back mementos from that as well. And then again, you have the trophy hunters who are really into the size of the trophies and measurements and stuff like that.
But, or just box ticking, right? Just like,
yes,
I need to have all the species
stamp collecting, as I call it. But unlike so many others, I don't really see that as a bad thing, because in my point of view, a trophy is basically a non-edible part of a very dead animal. So at that point, there's nothing we can do differently. The animal is gone; it's dead. So the choice is it okay that somebody keeps the inedible horns, or is it not okay? And I really, really cannot see a problem in that, because to the hunter who keeps that memento, it's just to remind him of happy memories. It brings a smile on his face. What's negative about that? I simply cannot see it. I do realize that it literally pisses people off, because it symbolizes that we like hunting. And I think the anti-hunting movement, what they hate the most is the fact that we actually like it. And typically, they jump to the conclusion that we like killing. But that's not entirely true, because hunting is not all about killing. We like the experience of hunting. And we accept killing because that's a part of the whole process. But I've never met a hunter who didn't enjoy a good hunt, even when it ended in nothing. So it's a really complex matter. And to get back to the trophies, to me, it's just a reminder, a memory, a souvenir, a memento.
I agree, and I agree with that. Like, would it be any better if I throw that horns or those antlers away?
No,
it wouldn't make a difference. But here is the question: we hear those. Well, I don't want to say and use the word narratives, but we hear a lot of we are in it for experience. We are in it for experience, to see the new places, to witness the culture, and even be, being happy out in the environment, in nature. And I totally, even if I go hunting on a farm here in Ireland, I drive, half an hour and I'm just on a farm. It's enjoyable for the experience. Now, the argument goes along the lines of, like, if it's all about the experience, as you say, why so much resistance to ban on trophy imports? It shouldn't matter, because those people, those hunters, they are there for experience, so they will go anyway, leave the money, do the control of the problem animals, bring the local economy and whatever, have their experience, which is first and foremost thing, and they just not gonna bring the horns in. What's the big deal?
I don't think that's true, because personally, I would go in any case. I've been hunting so many places in the world and only been bringing back photographs. Are those trophies that we should ban? That's another discussion. But I've done that for years and years. I have so many trophies hanging in hunting lodges around the world because I didn't want to bring them back.
Didn't want to hassle.
And then I know. Yes, and it's super expensive, and it was not about the trophy for me. It was more about, in many cases, the story I was there to write, or I took some great pictures that I can remember the hunt by. But I know a lot of hunters for whom the trophy is a part of the experience. They really cherish those hunting trophies. And again, as I said before, it's a very dead and inedible part of an animal that has already been killed. So to ban hunting trophies would have the consequence that these hunters would find the experience less. They wouldn't want to pay as much. Some people like to have some kind of physical thing in their hands when they put down a lot of money. And even though I don't feel so, I'm pretty sure that a lot of others do, and I'm sure that it would lead to fewer hunters going to put money down in these on these destinations, which would be a very bad thing, because they depend on that cash to do what they do. Other than that, I think the entire idea of banning something that is basically a very, very personal thing is just stupid. It would be like banning, say, okay, you can go to Nepal, but you cannot bring back any pictures. We should ban that. I mean, why? These trophies for the hunter means the same as these pictures for the guy who's been trekking in Nepal. Why should anybody else have the right to interfere with that? Because it makes no difference to anybody. I mean, we can discuss whether or not we should be hunting for these animals, whether or not it's beneficial for conservation and what have you. But I mean, I don't see one single reasonable argument that banning the import of hunting trophies helps anything. It's just interfering with other people's lifestyle choices, basically.
This is what you said earlier, that people perceive this like, oh, you like killing animals, you're compensating for your this and that, right? We heard all those arguments.
You must have a very small penis.
Yeah, exactly, the penis argument. And then effectively this is like a top of the, like, we're gonna stick it to those people without actually, like, what is like you're trying to achieve, because you're actually doing something, precisely opposite to what you say, that you want to conserve the animals, or you're doing that for animals. Look, it's I don't know what how that conversation should go any further, because I think that in the discussion on the trophy hunting and hunting, we reached sort of like I feel like a dead end. Like, everything was already said.
Many times over, yeah,
many times over, and this is like over and over, like, is the penis argument, this and that, and something else. And I think I need to mention one name here, Cecil. I said it sometimes that I think that messed up the whole discussion so badly.
For sure.
If I had a time machine, I would go back in time and kill that goddamn lion before the dentist did, so that thing never happened.
Yes. Good idea. That's proper use of a time machine. No, but you're absolutely true, and it's in many ways a discussion that's very, very stuck, because, as you say, we've seen it all before, many times. I actually saw a post on social media a couple of times called anti-hunting bingo, where they took 25 of those arguments and just put them up, and they could just make their choice. And it's unfortunately, it's very true that, and I believe our own arguments are the same as well. I mean, there's nothing new on any sides. So in order to move anywhere, at least one of the sides would have to think of a different strategy and maybe start, engaging a little bit more in dialogue and approaching the other side to get anywhere, because it is very, very stuck on. I am big proponent of, I don't know how to implement that, but on one of the conferences I heard that the anti-hunting argument is very emotional, and this is why it's getting so much traction. And as a hunters, we are kind of on the losing position, because we are not using emotional arguments. We are very matter of fact, evidence, numbers, stats, and that just don't cut it. And compared to like emotions, like, oh, look at those beautiful animals, majestic and whatever, killed by those
bloodthirsty psychos. And I get that argument that we should talk about emotions, but I just don't know how is it possible.
No, I haven't cracked that code either because I hunt because I like to hunt. I said that a couple of times now, but I went into what I do, explaining hunting and all that. Because
I applaud you for that, because the other thing that I said is
what I'm trying to say is that I do this because I genuinely feel that hunting, regulated hunting, is a part of the solution. I feel that if we lose that management tool, biodiversity will suffer, and I don't want to see that. But how to put that into some emotional defense is not very easy, because, as you said, all the arguments are more or less of a technical nature, and that's just how it is. But again, I have the feeling that this technical approach is very much necessary, because we don't have a second chance. I mean, if we blow it this time around, every time we lose a species or every time we lose a piece of habitat, it is more or less lost forever. And so I don't really see no reason for trying to experiment with things, because the situation is much too grave for that. And I also think that we are gradually, slowly moving in the right direction. More and more people actually gets this, but it takes a long time, because we don't have that fantastic shock effect that they have when they post a picture of a fat American guy kissing his wife in front of a dead lion.
And I was going to say that, I applaud you for saying, yeah, I hunt because I like, because that's the other thing that I kind of don't like, when the hunters are making an argument of like, oh, I'm controlling the predators, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that for biodiversity, or I'm doing that for farmers who are suffering crops, like, and like this saying, like, if you're so worried about that farmer, that farmer would give you a shovel and get you to. So I think we need to be honest and say, like, yeah, we're doing that because we like it, but because we're part of a system that supports biodiversity, that supports habitat conservation, that's why that is beneficial.
Yes, and I usually say to people like this that I and other recreational hunters, obviously, as the name implies, as the term implies, we hunt because we think it's good experience. But the reason that the Swedish authorities lets us hunt the bears is not that they think that we should have a good experience. It's because we become their management tool. So there's very different motivations depending on where in the system you are. Obviously, the Swedish authorities wants the bears to be hunted to keep down human-wildlife conflict and to maintain the bear population at some stable level that they have decided and what have you. They don't care that we are having a good time or not. And they are not in it for the money. So there's different motivations all over the place. But obviously, the reason that we do it voluntarily and absolutely for free is that we really, really like to do it. And as I sometimes hear hunters say, well, we do this to protect nature in Africa. That's entirely bullshit. It's nice to know. It's nice to know that a consequence of the money we put down in Africa is that people protect nature, but we're not doing the protection. We are shooting the animals because we like that experience, and it's a part of the whole system, and it's absolutely necessary. And we are allowed to feel good about contributing to that, but it's not why we go to Africa. I mean, and exactly that dishonesty when people fail to admit that is a very soft spot that we have, and it makes us a very easy target for the argument, why don't you just send Africa a check? I don't send Africa a check for the very same reasons that everybody else don't. I would like to go hunting. I would like to pay for it, but I'm not sending checks all over the place.
Nobody's
doing that, not even the anti-hunters.
Exactly. I remember you posted a video with a dead elephant where there was like an action of like, hey, you can buy this elephant, like, please, you are like bunch of prominent anti-hunting people, millionaires, multimillionaires, hey, buy that elephant. And then you were just standing next to a dead elephant. I was like, hey, it's dead.
Because we offered this herd of elephants for free to all these anti-hunting millionaires. Because the fact on the ground in southern Africa is that in many places there's too many elephants. And there's no takers. Nobody wants elephants, not even for free, because there's no more habitat left for them. And in spite of that, we always have, if somebody goes and says publicly, we have to take out some of the elephants in this area because they're destroying the habitat, you have this massive shitstorm, but no alternatives. So what we did in that case was that we, in cooperation with a landowner in South Africa, offered a herd of 15 elephants for free to anybody who would take it and show us how to manage elephants without hunting. And then everybody went completely silent. Because, I mean, it's free. So Ricky Gervais and all those guys who are very loudly against hunting, we contacted them directly. They were contacted by fans. The fans sent the offer to their managers and to movie companies they cooperate with, and it was shared by the tens of thousands. And all we heard was sound of crickets, complete silence. And then that video you referred to was when the landowner eventually had to shoot those elephants. And even then, because usually if I were to make a video where I stand in front of a dead, actually female elephant, it was an elephant cow, there would be a massive shitstorm. But in this case, silence.
Yeah. That's sometimes silence speaks louder than words, as they say.
Yes. And that whole put your money where your mouth is argument is very difficult to get around.
Folks, listen, before we wrap this up, just a reminder, subscribe to my newsletter. The link is in the description of the show. And Jens, if you look at your crystal ball, how do you see the future of hunting playing out? There are a lot of people who are very, concerned or even just gave up and say like, yeah, hunting will be gone in the next however many years. I even recently spoke with fly anglers, and one of them were convinced that within 20 years there will be no fly angling anymore. Some people say that hunting always going to be around. Maybe it's just not going to be recreational hunting. What are your views? Like, if you look at your crystal ball in, 10, 30, 50 years, what do you see?
Well, I'm more optimistic than I used to be just 3 or 5 years ago, because what we see, especially here in Scandinavia, where we have regular polls among non-hunters, is that the acceptance of hunting is growing. And we already have a majority of the non-hunting population in favor of the kinds of hunting we do here in Scandinavia. And what we have seen move that public opinion is information. We've been doing this for a lot of us for maybe 10 years, and we can really see the numbers move in favor of hunting. Most non-hunters are fairly intelligent people. And they do understand these fairly simple arguments that we have. Our problem has been that we haven't been heard, and it's also been that hunters have been hiding a bit for many, many years, and that's over, and we can see a positive effect of that. Obviously, the situation is less bright in countries like the UK, where you have a big opposition to any kind of hunting. But even there, we are moving in the right direction. What I see, we have these proposed hunting trophy import bans, and I think they are moving to the fourth try or something like that in as many years. And every time they try, it gets more and more difficult for them to go through with it because we have more and more factual scientific arguments on the table and more parliamentarians actually daring to say, the science is telling us that we might hurt wildlife with this ban. So let's step back and think about it. So I think we are slowly moving in the right direction, and I'm very optimistic. I think hunting will stay for at least our time. And I definitely agree that in countries where we have large wildlife, hunting will definitely never go away because we do need it as a tool. Take wild boar. It's impossible to coexist with wild boars without hunting because the population explodes within a few years if you do not keep it at a certain level. And if you don't, it's not only impossible to have crops in the field. It also gets very difficult to maintain gardens and cemeteries and stuff like that. They do make a lot of damage. So we will always have some kind of hunting, but I'm very optimistic that we will also have recreational hunting in the future.
Fantastic. So Jens, just to really wrap this off, any advice for hunters, how to talk about hunting, how to communicate about what they do with non-hunters, with people who don't understand, or maybe even with the anti-hunters?
One is, as we talked about just before, be honest. Be honest about it. We have nothing to hide. Another thing is be factual. Know your facts. I mean, if you don't know, say you don't know. Just don't make things up. And thirdly, we could be a lot better at respecting other people's feelings. We gain nothing by showing non-hunters a close-up photo of a headshot baboon. I mean, images that are scaring people does nothing good for hunting. And to be honest, every single shitstorm that we had on social media for the last many, many years always started with a bad trophy photo. And I'm not saying that we should ban trophy photos or anything, but I'm saying that we are allowed to just think a little bit about what we throw into people's faces. And we gain nothing by provoking them. It's not that we are supposed to be dishonest about it, but why deliberately provoke people? So those are my 3 advices on how to communicate this for the future.
Jens, they were words of wisdom. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.